So I had a mentor of mine once say to me that you have to remember when dealing as a principal that you have to remember that every parent who walks in your door is dealing with the ghosts of everything that ever happened to them in school. And it doesn't matter how open you are, you're still fighting those ghosts. And I think that's an important thing for all of us who are educators to remember, and to just echo everything Rebecca said. Our next speaker is a very dear friend of mine. He is one of my mentors. He is one of the people that when I think I've got this crazy idea, he's one of the people that I call to find out if that idea has any worth and value. He is, I think, one of the leaders in a kind of talk that I think we're going to hear a lot over the next few years, and that's design thinking. It is my pleasure to introduce Christian Long.
Good morning, first and foremost. I want to follow Rebecca's lead and sort of put the currency of being a parent on the table first. And I think Chris earlier today, when he came here, acknowledged that he had to make a decision as a parent, despite this remarkable opportunity. I want to take us to a place earlier this summer where I found out two things about myself, both very humbling and both remarkable. One, it turns out that I wasn't a very good parent, and two, as a professionally lifelong educator, I wasn't particularly good at teaching either. And yet, it was one of the most refreshing and powerful moments I had through the arc of both being a parent and certainly as a professional. I went and took a little bit of a time out from my to-do list, and like everyone in this room, just to be here today, we're juggling a dozen things. And it doesn't matter how well we believe we multitask or how many different sort of email threads we have to keep going and what our partners or our clients or our classrooms or our administrators, what they need from us. We're busy. And I knew that on this particular day, I needed to step off of that treadmill, and I needed to walk away from the thing that was paying the bills. And I needed to go and just sit and watch. And the place that I went to sit and watch was in a very hot park in the middle of Ohio. And like most communities in the United States this summer, it's been blistering hot. And so to sit outside at 11:30 in the morning under a hot July sun was not a comfortable situation. I was in a place I wasn't particularly familiar with. I wasn't good at the thing that I was going to watch. But what I did care about was one little person, a little 4.5-year-old, who was experiencing the art of skateboarding for the very first time in his life. So my son Beckett had signed up for summer camp. Like many of us, we try to find an experience that's enriching, and we want them to be in a place that keeps them busy, and we want them to come home incredibly tired at the end of the day, and we want them to have a story at the dining room table that night, perhaps. And my 4.5-year-old son signed up for skateboarding, which is crazy business, because he can't skateboard, and he's little, and he'll break. And his mother and I were convinced that this was crazy, and we kept trying to steer him towards art, or maybe soccer, or maybe rocketry or something, and he would have nothing of it because he thought that skateboarding was magical. He didn't know what that meant, but he thought it was magical. So earlier this year, I went and got him at Target a Woody or a Toy Story skateboard that looked like a skateboard, but for $9.99 solved the problem of me not investing too much in a thing that would break my son. And at the end of his week of skateboarding, I finally went out to the skate park, and we're talking about just like you would imagine from the films. It was an old swimming pool that was meant for carving, and these incredible ramps, and these places that if you're good at what you're doing, gave you air. It gave you freedom. It gave you a place to express, to create, to carve. To a 4.5-year-old, it was just emergency room after emergency room after emergency room opportunities. And what I noticed were a couple of things. One is my son wasn't on the board that I bought him, which is a problem, right? Because I paid good money, $10 worth anyway. He was on a real board, the kind of board meant for grown men and women. Two, he wasn't being watched, problem of some concern in a place of danger. Three, it was incredibly hot, and I'm sure he hadn't used his huge water bottle that was in his backpack that we dutifully packed. And four, he had a wicked smile on his face, right? And you know some version of the story if you have kids or have loved a kid or were a kid or any version thereof. But there was something else, and I said that this was a moment where I found I wasn't a particularly good parent and wasn't a particularly good educator. And I've been an educator for off and on about 15 years, a soccer coach and a summer camp counselor, and taught kids that went off to elite schools and taught kids that could barely function at their grade level. And I'd been a parent his entire life. And here's why I wasn't a particularly good parent that day. Every time I saw my Beckett, and forget all your kids, all I cared about at that moment wasn't I'm an educator and I care about the system. It wasn't I'm a school designer and I think about your community. And it wasn't I wonder where the future of learning is going. It's that's my kid. God help you if he breaks. Right? And so here was my kid going down a hill, a ramp, on a skateboard. And he wasn't breaking. And most of the time, he didn't fall. Occasionally, he did. He did a wicked yard sale a few occasions into the grass on the concrete. But what struck me, and this is why I didn't consider myself a very good parent at the end of this field trip, and certainly not a good educator, is what I heard when Beckett did fall, and it was true of all the other young girls and young boys between the ages of 5 and, say, about 10 that were there, and only 1 or 2 had ever skated before. I heard, wicked wipeout, amigo. Dude, sick fall. And this is from his 20, 30, and 40-year-old instructors. The other thing I started to hear was, are you ready for the big one? Do you think you can go down that ramp now? How are you going to do it? And I thought years and years of being an educator, and I thought I was pretty good. I had a lot of kids who responded well on the field, in the woods, in classrooms, went off to do good things, complimenting years later. And to a degree, my career has been blessed with lots of opportunities that said you know a little something about where maybe it's going. But I realized at that moment that what I was really good at was yeah, but. What I was really good at is be careful. What I was really good at is I'll show you. And there I was sweating as a father in the middle of a July day in Ohio, knowing that I was going to go back to the office and help design schools around the world, and I was going to occasionally be on a stage like this and talk about where the future of education is going, what's the trajectory of social media, and what do we mean by inquiry and imagination. And I realized at that moment I was really good at yeah, but. Great idea, but. And to a professional, to a colleague, that's just the currency we spend. I respect you, but. To a parent, to an administrator, to a client, fine, we get that game. But to a child, I'm not sure there's a more perverse expression that we could offer them when they're willing to try. Be careful. Don't. What I realized is these skateboard instructors, a couple of 20-year-olds, a 30-year-old, and a 40-year-old, who'd probably been skating since he was a kid, they were remarkable at and. That's what you've tried. What else could you do? Great fall. How are you going to get up? They were really good at teaching the difference between being sore and injured. Really good at evaluating risk and possibility. Extraordinarily good at maybe the most simplest thing in the world, recognizing where that child is, but more importantly, the horizon line that kiddo is looking at. Because it's like Gretzky. It's not where the puck is, it's where the puck's going. It's a kid on a skateboard, and draw it as a metaphor at this point. It's not about how they're standing, it's about where they're looking. It isn't about the fall, the yard sale. It isn't about having to dust themselves off. It's about why are they still grinning when they get back up, right? And so what I was going to talk about today, and what I realized is listening to Rebecca, that what was going to be a 1-minute segment, sort of that little bit of a currency. Hi, I'm a dad, da-da-da. I'm an educator, I've been teaching for a while, coaching, etc. I'm blessed to work for a global architecture firm that designs schools and learning environments and wrestles with this all around the world. Iconically, a lovely artifact. But what's the impact on the spinal cord? Really easy, it turns out, to stack. And it turns out that in most schools, the reason we buy this furniture is because it's easy to stack and put away. Not because a kid can go anywhere or fidget or move, let alone feel comfortable. It's about the efficiency of stacking and cleaning and maintenance and cost, but rarely about the speed of movement and curiosity and inspiration and wonder. It's never about the wicked grin. It's never about where we're going. So I work for a firm that tries to wrestle with that problem. What do we mean by the learning environment of the future? And to a certain degree, it's about space. This space is remarkable. It hacks the code of the way I grew up thinking of the YMCA. It butchers it. It's about something else. It's about a promise to be part of a conversation that transcends all of our tweets, it turns out. That is, in the moment as we are, it turns out that most of what we treat is fodder, it's dust, it's not even quaint. We aren't even wrestling with the big problems. We're pushing ourselves to be in the moment. We're tweeting, we're updating, and I drink that Kool-Aid ferociously. But do we ask the tough questions? So working for an architecture firm that designs schools, and we've got no more impact than anybody else. We have budgets that are pretty frightening. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars. You have to ask different questions. But what I realized is this summer, hold on a second. Because what should be intimidating is actually really inspiring music. But what I realized this summer is that responsibly, as a professional, I have many things that I have to keep an eye on. But for an hour this summer, I realized two things. I wasn't a particularly good parent because I focus on be careful, yeah, but. I wasn't a particularly good educator because I was really good at why they couldn't go forward. What I realized that day is the questions that we need to wrestle with isn't about the cost of the furniture. It's not about whether or not Facebook should or shouldn't be in the classroom. It's not about whether or not politically, financially, spiritually, the other guy is right or wrong. It's, are we looking at the horizon line that our kids are looking at? Because the last time I checked, learning is non-negotiable. But any of us that are holding on to some kind of formal schooling or title or the word education, we are at risk of being irrelevant. But if we focus on learning and at the speed of our kids' questions, and more importantly, at the speed of their willingness to get back up, then we have a right to be in this conversation. So for what it's worth, I'm not a particularly good parent and not a particularly good teacher, and I daydream a lot about where the future of education is going. But more importantly, I'm curious, not what we'll be retweeting today, I'm much more curious about what the hell are we going to do come Monday. Forgive my language, but I am really curious what we're going to do come Monday when we dust ourselves off and sort of smile and get that wicked grin that a kid gets when they want to know what's possible. Thank you for the music and your patience.